Welcome to The Interchange. I'm Latife Hayson. For the past 25 years, I was living in Napa Valley, California, consulting and representing buyers and sellers of wineries, vineyards, and luxury estates. My clients were the founders of publicly listed companies, tech giants, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists, all living their best lives and many changing up the world before our eyes. On The Interchange, I take a deep dive into their personal stories and many other fascinating people I have met from around the world.
If we all suddenly are in driverless electric networked cars, maybe it can all be coordinated such that we don't have as much traffic.
We talk cutting-edge technology, financial intelligence, leadership, climate change, the power of philanthropy, passion, and much more. But that's not all. As a patron of the world-renowned festival Napa Valley, I chat with internationally renowned artists and emerging talent who grace the festival stage during the 10 best days of summer each year. It's like being in Europe and going out to a performance every day and every night in the most beautiful settings and incredible food and wine. You really do feel like you're in Europe. So tune in for each episode because The Interchange is where inspiration meets innovation. Hello everyone, Greg Flynn is the founder, chairman and CEO of Flynn Group and Flynn Properties. Flynn Group is the largest franchise operator in the world, with over 2,700 Applebee's, Taco Bell's, Panera's, Arby's, Pizza Hut's, Wendy's and Planet Fitness units, generating over $4.7 billion in sales and employing over 75,000 people in the United States, Australia and New Zealand. Flynn Properties invests in commercial real estate and has owned and managed more than 3 million square feet since its founding in 1994. It also owns 121 hotels, including luxury resorts in Mexico, Napa Valley, Telluride, and San Francisco. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into all the changes since the last time I spoke with Greg on my Napa Valley Inside Out podcast. Greg, welcome and thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to catch up with you. You have been on a major shopping spree, so what a difference 6 years can make. I thought we'd start out with speaking about the origin and evolution of Flynn Properties as it relates to commercial real estate. So last time we were together in November 2018, you had just sold most of your commercial office space, and you were sitting around waiting to see what happened, and the pandemic happened about 16 months later. So what can you tell us about the history of your commercial real estate and how you've been deploying funds?
Sure. So I started in real estate out of college in '86 and worked in New York and London, and then went to business school. And I came out of Stanford Business School in '94. And you'll recall back then the real estate market, the commercial real estate market was just terrible. And that's when the Resolution Trust Corporation had seized the assets of many banks and was selling them off. It was the buying opportunity of a lifetime. And so I started a little real estate fund back then, small investments from people I met in my banking days. And we started to buy distressed real estate. And that was the only thing to do back then. I mean, if you were in real estate and you didn't see that opportunity, you weren't looking. And it was the best opportunity I've ever seen probably my whole career, and it was really my first. But we've now been through 3 cycles like that. So the sort of mid-90s, after the dot-com bust, after the GFC. I think we're like that, we're at a moment like that now, right?
Yeah.
And, San Francisco in particular, where we focus, is a highly cyclical commercial real estate market. I mean, wide swings. And, we've seen it before and we're seeing it now. So we went from no availability to nearly 40% office availability in downtown San Francisco. No one's seen anything like it. And the worst we'd ever seen before was like 20% vacancy. We are in the process of buying again right now. In fact, I close in 2 weeks on a very cool creative tech office building. And we're paying, about a third of what it was worth 4 years ago. Now, we're going to have to release it and do a bunch of stuff to it. But, I think I would never bet against San Francisco in the long run. And I find the most determinative factor of success in commercial real estate investing is getting the timing right. You can do everything else right, but get the timing wrong, and there's no hope.
Yeah.
And you can do almost everything else wrong, get the timing right, and you're going to make money. And so we do focus on that, and I think now is the time.
Yeah, because it actually was perfect timing when you sold.
Yeah, it was very lucky timing. Yeah.
Well, lucky, what an amazing crystal ball you had. But what is the status of San Francisco office space at the moment?
So there's a lot of it vacant, and the rents are falling very fast. Rents probably peaked out in the 80s and 90s for most Class A and Upper B space. It's falling into the 40s now. Vacancy, as I mentioned, is just south of 40%. There is activity, but there's also so much space available that it's not making a dent in vacancy. The highest quality properties are holding up. I mean, they're still getting $90+ rents. It's the rest of the market, which, so almost can't be leased at any price right now.
Yeah. I believe it's the same in Australia, actually. My developer friends tell me the same thing. All the beautiful new buildings, they're leased, but the others aren't.
Yeah.
So to that end, what are some realistic options for repurposing those buildings that may never be rented again? Because, there is, I think, all over the world going to be some variation of work from home.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of buildings are going to need to be repurposed. And, people say, they could turn them into residential. Well, no, I don't think you can, right? It's very complicated. So what do you think some of the realistic options are for those buildings?
So I think it will vary depending on the type of building. So historic buildings that have higher ceilings and shallower bay depths, good window lines, they might be really good residential conversions. Unfortunately, modern towers with large floor plates, very deep bay depths, the ratio of window line to square footage is low.
Yeah.
That's almost impossible to convert, into residential without drilling a new core through it, which is prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
So I think for those buildings, you're going to have to find an alternative commercial use. And what people have talked about is maybe university, or tertiary college, right? Take some of these downtowns and make them education hubs. And even if you need to give it away, there are such ancillary benefits from the location of tertiary education, embedded in the middle of a society.
Yeah.
That's sort of the most interesting option I've heard. I also just hope that people go back to work more. I'm not a fan of remote work, and my observation, remote work is less work. That's why people like it so much. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure that employers are going to stand for it. They're going to really start to figure out who's working hard and who's not. And the people who are working hard are more inclined to come back to the office.
Well, speaking of that, how have you been managing that, getting your people to be working in the office?
Well, most of our employees work in restaurants, so you can't do that remotely, right?
Right.
Our office workers, we do have a hybrid arrangement.
Yeah.
It's up to 2 days remote with the sort of consent of your direct supervisor. If I had my way, it would be 5 days in the office, but you need to be competitive for employees right now, and employees really have come to expect some level of remote work. Mm-hmm. And you figure out over time who is working hard and who's taking advantage of that. You just don't see it as clearly as you used to.
Yeah, I think.
But ultimately, people who are taking advantage of it will be filtered out, in my opinion.
Yeah, we've all certainly seen employers taking a stronger stance on this, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you think it's going to take to revitalize San Francisco downtown, and clean up the homelessness and the out of control crime and the exodus of not only people but businesses from the city?
So I'd start by saying San Francisco, was already experiencing some quality of life problems before COVID, and COVID really made it a lot worse. But the city is getting better now, and especially the core downtown area where I work. The streets are cleaner, it's safer, there are more people coming down. But it's still not anywhere back to where it was. Probably half the storefronts are empty. They're not boarded up, but they're not tenanted either. So I'd say the first thing to fix the problem is just get more people downtown, and that's going to be getting people back to work. I was speaking with one of the mayoral candidates yesterday, and I asked him for a pledge, and he said he would pledge this to bring back city workers 5 days a week. And, there needs to be leadership from somewhere. The city is the obvious candidate to start that. But, I would love to, form a business coalition of business owners who said, okay, in the interest of the city and society, we are getting our people back to work 5 days a week. Now, I just said we're not doing that yet. We sort of all need to do it at the same time because there's a competitive issue there. But and then, the city is doing other things, and they should do more of it to activate the downtown. There was a band playing at Sansamon Market when I left to drive up here today. Yeah. And there were a bunch of people sitting around having lunch, listening to the band. There is a whole block that's been designated an open carry zone for walking around and having drinks like New Orleans. Yeah, and so that's sort of cool. Fun, and a bunch of restaurants there. There was a downtown light show, which was great. It's, images projected against buildings, and it brought people down at night. More of that will help. But ultimately, we need people working downtown and living downtown to revitalize the retail. That's what it's going to take.
But isn't it true, though, that a lot of the retail that has left, it's because they haven't felt that their staff are safe getting to and from work, and because of the crime? So, for example, is it Walgreens and CVS that have left the city pretty much like by the dozens of stores, right?
Yeah, I think you would probably want to distinguish between, retail businesses like that, which maybe are targets of crime, versus most retailers, which, the restaurants downtown or the gift card stores or they're suffering from lack of business. Yeah. It's really not safety. Yeah. It's just there aren't enough people to support, and it was always a pretty unsteady demand. It was mostly a lunch, demand down there, maybe some evening. But with that cut in half right now, it just doesn't support the business. So I think a lot of businesses sort of blame it on public safety, but really it's just they can't make enough money.
Yeah. And what do you think?
Now, having said that, we need to address the public safety concerns for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a mayoral race going on right now. Yeah. And we have two good options for candidates who I think stand a real chance of making a difference, Mark Farrell and Daniel Lurie. So.
Oh, great. And what about the homelessness and the defecation on the streets and all that kind of stuff? Like, what are they going to do about that?
So it's already getting better. And then the Supreme Court decision that came down 2 weeks ago that allows communities to remove tents and other homeless encampments is going to help. And you probably saw Governor Newsom's announcement last week that he has issued an executive order ordering the removal of tent encampments throughout the state. Yeah. So all of that stuff is going to help a lot. I mean, there needs to be a resolution on the part of society to do what it takes to fix this problem. And I feel that tide is turning right now.
Well, where will they go if they move them off the streets? What's the plan?
Well, it's interesting. So I had an opportunity to speak with Michael Bloomberg about New York a number of years ago, and I asked him, so how do you fix it in Manhattan? He said, first of all, it wasn't me. It was Ed Koch, and then it was Rudy Giuliani, and then it was me. And he said a few things need to happen. First and foremost, you need to hit a crisis moment such that the community gains the will to act and to do whatever it takes to fix it. So I think San Francisco's mostly at that point now. Second, you need to have a apparatus in place to do something about it. And in New York, there's a very strong mayor's office. Right now in San Francisco, a lot of the powers in the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors is district elections. So it's not very effective. Most district supervisors are interested in just pushing the problem to someone else's district. There's an initiative on the ballot this November. I'm sorry, it didn't qualify this November. Hopefully it'll be on the next ballot, which will make 4 of 9 supervisor seats at large. So that's part of the solution, is have more of the leaders of the community have the whole community's interest at heart. And then I think there needs to be a recognition that in striking that balance between sort of compassion and public safety, like compassion can't always win. Right. Like we need to just say, sorry, we have beds here, but if you don't want to use one of our beds, you need to get out of town. Here's a bus ticket. Yeah. And that's what New York did. So New York they created an archipelago of halfway houses and shelters and substance abuse treatments and mental health treatment centers. But if people who were on the street didn't want to utilize any of that, they put them on buses, and they always put them on buses to their hometown, where hopefully they had more of a support community. But one way or another, they were leaving town.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've been hearing for years and years that they actually put them on buses elsewhere and bring them to San Francisco because the benefits are so good.
Yeah, and
you should run for office. Oh my God, you'd be awesome.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, oh my God, that's right. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't listen to me.
I enjoy my life way too much.
Yeah. Okay.
But I admire and appreciate people who do run for office. So.
Yeah. Not me. So let's talk about luxury resorts and hotels. But before we get into your portfolio, roughly how many hotels and resorts did you own before the pandemic? Where were they roughly? And how did you navigate around all that?
So we got into hotels with our acquisition of Esperance in 2006. And, I learned about the opportunity to buy it because I'm a small limited partner in Auberge du Soleil.
Right.
And I got to know the Harmons and Auberge resorts that way. And so when it came up for sale, Mark Harmon said to me, you got to buy it. And I looked at it and it's like, I think we should. And we did. And that's been a tortured investment. I mean, I love it like a wife,
Yeah.
but a wife who tortures me. Right? I mean, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. We had.
Is that right?
Yeah, we bought it in 2006. Closed it in 2007 for a big renovation, reopened right into the global financial crisis.
Oh, yeah.
And then we had Mexican drug violence, right? You call that, we had swine flu. Remember it was called the Mexican swine flu?
What? Mexican violence?
Yeah, no, not in Cabo, but it was highly publicized.
Oh, yes.
This sort of drug violence.
You're talking about your hotel in Mexico.
No, our hotel, yeah. I'm just talking about like what went wrong with this hotel.
Yeah.
And then Hurricane Odile came and hit in 2015 and destroyed the hotel. But that was a blessing in disguise because largely on the back of insurance money, we finally were able to rebuild it from the bones and make it the perfect resort it always wanted to be. And since then, we've done really, really well. We finally got all our money out and we still own it, and so we're in a good place. But that was our first investment. And then we started buying more resorts, so like Solage and Carneros and the Madeline and Telluride. But it was, that's not a scalable business. It's a great business that I love, like I have passion around it.
Yeah, you do.
But what I've learned in our restaurant business is that there is power in scale. Mm-hmm. But it needs to be a scalable business. So our restaurants are chain restaurants, and it's the ultimate scalable business. We pivoted in the hotel investment sort of business toward chain hotels in 2019. So we purchased 6 Marriott Courtyard hotels. And we now, of our 121 hotels, all but 6 are select service or extended stay franchised hotel, like chain hotels.
Oh.
So they're, Hampton Inns or Hilton Garden Inns or Courtyard by Marriott, those kind of hotels.
Across America.
And we have them all across the country now. And that's a good business. That's like a steady money maker of a business where you can really start to enjoy scale economies.
But were you making money during the pandemic?
We made a lot less money. But, it came back and now we're making good money.
Yeah.
So the pandemic was a blessing for us on balance. So the hotels we owned going into it, like these 6 Marriott hotels, they had a bad year and they've had a bad couple of years after that. So that was bad for us.
Yeah.
But we bought our first bigger portfolio in 21, and it was a COVID buy, like bottom of the market COVID buy. And we bought 20 select service hotels. And then the following year we bought 88 in one big transaction. And so while COVID wasn't good for hotels, it was good if you were a buyer of hotels because, prices came way down.
Yeah. I thought you only had 6 hotels or so, or luxury resorts when we last spoke. Mm-hmm. So you've made all these other acquisitions,
since
100 and something. Yeah. You've been busy.
Yeah.
Well, who are your investors? You have institutional investors, right?
So we have, on the real estate side, we have one institutional investor called Varde Partners. And on the restaurant side, we have 2 minority outside investors, a small private equity firm here in San Francisco called Main Post Partners, and a large Canadian pension fund, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I think I read that. Tell us about, you bought the Huntington Hotel, the famed Huntington Hotel on Nob Hill in San Francisco. So tell us about that and what you're doing there.
So I'm very excited about it.
Oh, you should be.
If I asked you, you have friends coming to San Francisco who can afford anything, and they just want to stay at the best hotel in the city, what would you say to them? What would you recommend?
Oh, God, I don't go down there anymore. I wouldn't, Four Seasons probably, but I don't like the area.
Yeah. So I've asked that question.
I stay at the Fairmont myself. I always stay at the Fairmont across the road from the Huntington.
Yeah. So I've asked that question to many, many people, and there's not an easy, obvious answer to that.
No, there's not.
I want the Huntington to be the easy, obvious answer to that question. Like we're setting out to build or reintroduce the far and away best hotel in San Francisco. And the Huntington is really well suited to that. First of all, I think the field is wide open. But the Huntington, the location on Nob Hill is now greatly preferred to Market Street or the financial
100%.
district or South of Market.
Absolutely.
It's a lovely location. The architecture is lovely. 1924 sort of bespoke brick and
it's an institution. I mean, it's famous.
The average room size is the largest in the luxury set by far. So it's 581 square feet average room size. That compares to like 350 to 400 for a Four Seasons.
Definitely.
Something like that. The suite mix is greater than 50%. It has a beloved restaurant, the Big Four, in it, which we're going to bring back. Cleaned up a little bit, basically just the way it was, because everyone
loves it. The locals love it.
I can't tell you how many people got engaged there, had a first date there, go there every year. And the one thing I hear is, don't screw with the Big Four. So we're bringing it back the way it was, just cleaned up.
It.
And the Nob Hill Spa, which is the best spa in San Francisco by far. It was a little long in the tooth, when the hotel closed during COVID. We're going to make it perfect. And then we've got one little surprise coming with the hotel too.
Oh, what is that?
It'll be another little outlet to enjoy.
It'll be what?
Another outlet to enjoy. But I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. You'll have to come see it.
You've got to break the news on the interchange.
Think King Cole in New York.
Oh my goodness.
So.
Good for you. So how many rooms does it have?
It has about 134 right now. But some of the rooms are being used for offices, so it'll have about 140 when we're done.
Did you get that hotel because the previous owners had a hard time during the pandemic?
So the previous owner had paid a lot for it and had a very large mortgage on it. And when it closed for COVID, it was worth less than its mortgage. So it was rational for that owner to walk away. And so we bought the loan from Deutsche Bank and then foreclosed in a cooperative foreclosure, the day we bought it. And we technically bought it on the courtroom steps the same day we bought the loan.
You're brilliant.
But we paid $38 million for a hotel where the previous owner had a basis of $100 million just from 2019. Right, so we started in a very good place.
He bought it in 2019.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that was bad timing. Wasn't
bad luck.
That's when you were selling. Yeah. Things. What is the next chapter for? What's the next chapter for office space? What's your plans for that before we continue on? And then you can tell me what the next chapter is for hotels and resorts. What your plans are.
So, we've been out of the office market since, the late teens, as you know, and we're going back in right now. Like literally I'm closing in 2 weeks on our first office building we've bought in 5 years.
Oh, this is the first one since.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good, yeah.
And, there aren't many people investing in office in San Francisco right now, but I think it's a good time.
Yeah.
I love the Huntington buy, but there are very few people buying hotels in San Francisco right now.
No, I was going to say, but that's what does Warren Buffett say? Buy when everybody else is running in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Well, you're
it's interesting. This office building we're buying, I can't tell you which it is because we haven't closed. We will in 2 weeks. But we're buying it all equity. Like you can't get a loan to buy an office building right now.
Yeah.
And that screens out almost all buyers. Right. That's one of the reasons you can buy so well because not many people can come up with the
cash,
tens and 20s of millions of dollars in cash it takes to buy these.
Oh, and by the way, can you get insurance for office buildings?
So sure, you can get property insurance, which includes fire insurance. We won't get earthquake insurance. Usually we only get it when it's required by a lender, and in this case we won't have a lender. Earthquake insurance is useless. Like it's super expensive, the deductibles are incredibly high, and they don't cover a lot of things. And so the only reason we ever get it is because some lender requires it.
Is that right? Because, I was laying in bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, wide awake as you are, when the earthquake hit, and I had just built my house. and my house was moving like this as I laid in bed.
Yeah.
Thank God it was going in that direction, not the other. But all I could think about was I don't have earthquake insurance, and I took it out. You better believe within a week I was like, because I figured, you know, I can afford the deductible's high, right? I think it was several $100,000 and quite a few $100,000 actually. But I could afford that rather than rebuild my house. So I figured, you know, insurance is gambling. Will it happen to you or not happen to you, you know? So what would you do though? I mean, even if you pay cash.
So I was up here for that same earthquake. My wife and I were in bed.
Yeah.
We felt the shock. It was a very serious shock.
On your way up on the hill. Up in the hill.
And so we go upstairs and we have these big chandelier type lanterns, and they're all silently swaying in perfect synchronization. It was very, very strange. But you know, the next morning I did a thorough inspection of everything, and there was no damage.
Do you know?
And I'm glad I didn't have earthquake insurance because it would have been a waste.
Well, you know, it's so fascinating. I had an extremely long house that I had built, very, very, very long. And if it was going in the opposite direction, it would have been a disaster. But anyway, I had a big wine cellar, but I hadn't built it out. So I had all these boxes of wine in there open, just sitting around, and candles everywhere, glass everywhere in the living room. And I thought, oh my God, I can't even walk down there to see what's happened. And I didn't. I stayed in bed. And the next morning I got up just expecting to see everything everywhere, and not one thing had moved except a tiny candle, round candle, had fallen on the floor.
And your insurance wouldn't have covered that.
But you know, it could have got, other people had a lot of damage, but I was just very, very lucky, but I didn't want to take the risk. So, but we will get to insurance, about the fire insurance. But let's see what I wanted to ask you. Next chapter for Flynn Properties is, are you going to expand internationally or?
No, I don't think so. Not Flynn Properties. You know, we already have 2 hotels in Mexico, but not like, you know, with our primary business. There's just so much opportunity, so much real estate in America, and it's the best market in the world.
Yeah.
So I don't feel a need to go outside.
Do you buy in New York?
I have an apartment in New York, but no. Actually, we have 4 apartments in New York. 3 are investment, and then 1 is just we use. But no, not commercial. That's you know, you need to know at least as much about the market as the local players, and that's a big, complicated market. I'll never know as much about it as the people there. So
tell me, do you use AI at all in your with your hotels?
So I would say our brands do. I'm not sure we do, but really it's in figuring out, it's in marketing, and it's especially in revenue management. It's sort of how to offer and discount and price in very, very real time. You know how airline rates change all the time? Yeah, our hotel rates change all the time too. And it has to do with understanding, you know, the ebbs and flows of demand and what all the competitors are doing in real time. There's a fair bit of AI that goes into that. And then the other would be just like reservation systems. You know, you can automate a lot of that and have, you know, voice recognition, and just like in our restaurants, you know, that's probably going to be the standard for drive-thrus shortly, I think, is you're not talking to someone who's got a headset on, you're just talking to an AI that's, you know, understanding you and putting it into
that makes sense. They don't need someone standing at a cashier there. Okay, let's talk about the origin and evolution of Flynn Group. So Flynn Group was Flynn Restaurant Group until 2023, and then you brought Planet Fitness. Is that just in Australia, Planet Fitness? Or?
No. We have 40 Planet Fitness clubs in Atlanta and Boston. And you know, we bought 37, and we've built 3 since then. But it was very much a deliberate diversification for us. I mean, if you think of the growth of Flynn Group in chapters, chapter 1 was Applebee's. You know, we did nothing but Applebee's for 12 years, got big at it, got good at it. It's where we laid the foundation, you know, the structure, the culture, the core team, all the systems, the access to capital, the track record. You know, so that was up until like 2012. In 12, we decided to diversify. That's when we said, you know, how should we diversify? Like, what do people want from restaurants? And if you look around, it's like they're telling you what they want by virtue of how many of each type there are. And one thing became clear, they mostly want quick service restaurants. Like 67% of all restaurants in America are quick service restaurants. And then, there's a large category of full service restaurants and then a small but growing category of fast casual restaurants in between, like a Panera, something like that. So we said rather than, try to, outsmart the market, let's just grow to mirror the market. Like, we will give the people what they want. We will ourselves become composed like the industry and become a mostly quick service company with, some fast casual restaurants and some full service restaurants. And that's what we did over the next 10 years. That's when we got into everything but Applebee's in restaurants. So our quick service restaurants at Taco Bell and Wendy's and Pizza Hut and Arby's. And then fast casual is Panera. So that was chapter 2. Chapter 3 is, we're going to keep growing in our core middle lane, like that big middle lane of U.S. franchise restaurants. But, we layered on 2 new growth channels this year. One is international, and that's Australia and New Zealand. And the other is adjacencies. So these are businesses that are consumer-facing services businesses that operate under a franchise model, but they're not restaurants. And so Planet Fitness is a perfect example. They're all franchised businesses. They serve consumers, right? They're like running restaurants, but frankly, they are a little easier than running restaurants. And it's a great business, fabulous business.
Have people gone back to working out in to pre-pandemic levels?
Yeah, we're way above 2019 now in that.
Interesting.
That business, yeah.
Now, why do you think that is?
Not all fitness players are, but our businesses.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think Planet Fitness has emerged as the absolute dominant fitness player. I mean, there are 2,500 Planet Fitness clubs in the United States. It's the next largest player is like 400 or something like that. The ad fund of Planet Fitness is something like 3 times bigger than the marketing funds of all other concepts combined. Like, it's pulled away from the pack. So just like in restaurants, we only play in premier brands, like big, established, with all the scale economies, but especially the advantage of marketing. Like Planet Fitness checks all those boxes. And so it was a great diversification. Also, I just sort of chuckle and think it's part of the great circle of life, We can feed them and then they can go work out and come right back. They can sleep in our hotel and then come back the next day and do it all over again.
I love it. I love the way you think. Well, how did you navigate around with the food industry around that in the pandemic,
Well, in the week of March 13th, 2020, none of us knew what was coming. I mean, it looked like a meteorite and we were the dinosaurs, right?
Right.
And so we just braced for whatever was going to happen. We had to, all restaurants had to make 2 crucial decisions immediately. One was, do you stay open or close? The second is, do you furlough or lay off? And the right answer to both of those is you stay open and you furlough. And you stay open because business came back faster than everyone expected. And it's very expensive and difficult to reopen a closed restaurant. And relatedly, it's much easier to bring back people you have furloughed and maintain their benefits and maintain contact with them versus people you laid off, like trying to hire them back again.
No kidding.
And so when business came back, and it came back really a lot faster than everyone expected, we were ready. Like, our restaurants were open and we had our workforce ready to go. So we recovered much faster than everyone else.
So you stayed open, but you probably did very well because of takeout, right?
Yeah. Well, so you take our full service restaurants, Applebee's. I mean, they went from 11% off premise to 100% off premise, but we were already in the off premise business. We had all the systems for it. We had great packaging. We had great IT. We have cameras looking at dedicated parking spots, so we knew when you come up. So Applebee's went from 11% to 30% of our sales mix, like overnight in that business.
Wow.
And it's maintained at a much higher level. It's settled down a little bit, but it's still in the 20s now.
So has your business gone up because of takeout? Are people, do you have more business because of takeout?
Oh, yeah. It's a permanent step function increase in our business. We had 2.7 million average unit volumes in our Applebee's business in 2019. They're just under 3.3 today.
Wow.
And that's not inflation. I mean, there's a little bit of inflation in there, but it's the growth of off-premise. Which, it's that extra 10% of business.
Oh, and by the way, how have you, everything's gone up for everybody. So how have you navigated that? Like with your prices, you've had to put your prices up, I would imagine, because everything's costing more, right?
So, it was sort of like the second punch. The first one was COVID, and we got through that. And then 21 was a great year. Yeah. But 22, inflation came on so hard and so fast that it really cut into our margins very badly. I mean, there were weeks when we were looking at, year-over-year increases in labor of 18%, and in cost of goods of 25%. And, this is a low margin business. I mean, like a 10% margin business. Right. So it went from being profitable to unprofitable in a matter of months. Yeah. And that was true for everyone. Yeah. And, the way you adjust is you take price. But it's not easy to take price really quickly, especially in a full service restaurant with printed menus. Right. So we, like most of our peers, got behind. Yeah. And that just hurt. We just made less money, but then we finally caught up. And now our prices are 20% higher than they were, and we're back to our same level of traffic, and we're profitable again. But 22 was a bad year.
Is there a real reason why so much food went up so much? I mean, do you really think? I just feel like during the pandemic, everything went through the roof, and it's not coming back. Not just food, but everything. Doesn't matter what you want to do. Or real estate went through the roof. You go to the hairdressers, food. Everything has gone through the roof. But why?
Well, inflation is genuinely a ratchet function. Like it goes up and it rarely comes down. And we haven't experienced any deflation. There have been categories, especially certain commodities, have come down. But in aggregate, things go up and they don't come down. And that's actually the way the Fed likes it. They just like it to do it in moderation, right? Yeah. And restaurants are no exception to that. We had to raise our prices. We did. But we find that every time we've ever tried over the years to lower a price, like a permanent price on a menu, all you're doing is discounting people who are already there. It's not going to drive any traffic. The way you effectively lower prices and drive traffic to justify it so that, you sell enough more of it to make it a good business decision is through promotions. So it's like a half-price hamburger that we advertise. Right. Then people come in for that. And sure, we're getting half the price, but we're selling 3 times as many or something like that. But just lowering prices on your menu won't get you there.
Right. So you moved into Australia and New Zealand. Yeah. So why did you choose those 2 countries?
Well, I mean, I love the countries to begin with. I spent a year in Brisbane, Australia.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and I have a graduate degree from the University of Queensland.
Another degree.
It doesn't even make my resume anymore.
You have so many degrees.
But I had a great time. Yeah. But there are other more logical reasons for it. Like it's the same language. It's the rule of law. Mm-hmm. It's got a demonstrated affection for American brands. The business we bought is a successful brand with a qualified team. It was a low risk, and it wasn't a very big bet for us. So it was, a great first step out of the country, like a fairly conservative first step. Oh, one other thing, it's a long way away, but there are really good nonstop flights from San Francisco to all of the major East Coast cities. Yeah. It's amazing. You can fly to Brisbane nonstop now, which you couldn't do back in the day. And you can go
from Dallas, by the way, straight through. It's amazing. Yeah. You bought Pizza Hut and Wendy's, or?
So we bought 260 Pizza Huts. We now have a little over 270 of them down there. Then we signed up to become the master franchisee for Wendy's down there. So we'll develop them from scratch. But we just closed on the purchase of all 20 Wendy's in New Zealand. And so we're not really starting from scratch in Australia. We now have a Wendy's business, nearby. It gave me confidence that Wendy's could work down there because, these New Zealand ones have been profitable for 20 years. And it gives us a running start. Like we have a supply chain set up. We have a body of operators who are knowledgeable in how to run Wendy's.
So I just read that Carl's Jr., I don't know, to be honest, I've never tried any of these things, sorry. But I don't know what the difference is between Wendy's and Carl's Jr., but Carl's Jr. They just took them down to Australia and they didn't make it. And I read what they said was that, because of inflation. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, that news made me nervous because we're trying to do something very similar. Yeah. I think Wendy's is a much stronger brand than Carl's Jr. Yeah. And Carl's Jr. didn't modify the format to be in any way uniquely well suited to Australia. They just took the U.S. model and put it down there. They did it very, very fast. They did it in locations which were typically sort of outer suburbs or even rural areas. Yeah. So they built like 30 units since 2016, which is a lot. Yeah. And I think they got just way out over their skis.
Yeah.
And, so we're now looking at some of those locations, and maybe we'll take some of them. But, we will do it differently. First of all, we're spending a lot of time understanding the Australian market, what succeeds, what doesn't, and introducing Wendy's there in a format that may not be like Wendy's here. Like, it'll be, what we think is the most likely to succeed in Australia.
Well, tell me I'm not in that world, but tell me, what are you noticing the difference between the two countries in habit for people?
They're pretty similar, really, in their tastes, but tastes change over time. So just like, if you look at the most successful quick service restaurants today, it's like Chick-fil-A, it's In-N-Out Burger, it's Raising Cane's. They have a much smaller number of items that they do really well and really quickly. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of the opposite of McDonald's, which now, has just a vast array of complicated menu, so many categories. The category killers are doing very well generally. And we think that in Australia, we can sort of introduce that category of restaurant, leveraging, the sort of historic advantages and good products of Wendy's, but with a much narrowed down menu in a much more contemporary sort of environment, and really going for speed and consistent quality at low price.
I think, like I said, I'm not in that world, but I think that Australians have a healthier diet, I think. I don't think they're as much into fast food, but you tell me, are they? I'm never around fast food.
Macca's and Hungry Jack's are very popular down there, and that's not health food.
Yeah.
They do very well. Yeah. Domino's has 800 locations, and they're not selling.
I just know our breakfasts are so healthy. Have you been out to breakfast in Australia?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's really cool.
Well, maybe it's a little different than the United States.
Yeah.
The United States, has interest in better for you food too.
Yeah.
But you can't show me a single national chain that is a health food chain.
Yeah.
They don't exist, and many have tried.
Yeah.
And so what's happened is that most people want food which is indulgent, which they just like to eat, and they don't have much concern for the health, but some do, and so you have healthy menu items. But there's not enough demand out there to support a full chain.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about the Mediterranean diet? Well, is it Kava?
Yeah, Kava's great.
Kava's doing great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people seem to love that. I do want
to let me comment on that, because I love Kava, and but the best example is Chipotle, where
I heard they're fantastic. I've never been, but
okay, so they very successful.
Very.
What it really is, though, is it's scoop and serve Mexican that is got a lot of fat and a lot of sodium, and therefore tastes really good. But they've spent decades telling you is somehow better for you and better for the world.
Chipotle?
Yeah, and so people believe that it's somehow better for you and better for the world, and so they feel better about eating what it is they actually want to eat that tastes good to them. Yeah. It's totally brilliant. Well, but don't be fooled into thinking it's health food.
Oh, I've got to check it out. Well, their stock is like, wow. Their stock, and Kava's I think it's doing,
Kava's
the stock's not doing so well, but I think everybody seems to like it. I just listen to CNBC. I just hear what
Brett Schulman, the founder, is a friend and a brilliant restaurateur. And he offered me the opportunity to invest like 15 years ago, and like an idiot, I didn't.
Yeah. Would you buy the stock?
I don't know. I don't follow it.
Okay. I do want to ask you about GLP-1s. Okay, so for our viewers who don't know what GLP-1s are, it's like an Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, and basically it was first introduced for people with diabetes, and then they found that it was really good with weight loss. So more and more of these drugs are coming out from Eli Lilly and Nova. They've taken the world by storm. What they do is they slow down your digestion, they suppress your appetite, and they stop cravings. However, once you go off them, you put the weight back on. But in the meantime, people are losing a lot of weight. So I follow CNBC, and I see this question being asked all the time, whether people are seeing changes in their finances, people like yourself with the stores that you have, the restaurants that you have. Are you noticing it in your numbers, number one? Number two, are you seeing it in what people order, smaller portions, less? Are you noticing it at all?
So we're not noticing it yet. It may be a function of the fact that it's still very expensive. And
they're like $1,000 or $1,200 a month.
Right. So, people who can afford it probably aren't coming to our restaurants.
Yeah.
And if it becomes, for instance, covered by most insurance carriers or the price comes way down, then maybe we do see it.
Yeah.
But like you say, you have to stay on it, for it to have ongoing benefit.
Yeah.
And my kind of hope is that, people are on it, maybe they eat less, but once they go off, then they're starving, they come to our restaurant.
Yeah, but maybe what happens is you change your menu a little bit, right? More protein and salad, or I guess
we might disagree a little bit. I'm not sure it makes you crave healthier food. I think it makes you crave less food. Like, it's an appetite suppressant.
You're right, but you know what else I learned about it? Apparently, it really affects people's muscle mass. So you have to eat apparently a lot more protein.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So.
Well,
anyway.
we sell a lot of protein, so we're good there.
Yeah. Although I was asking Jean-Charles Bousset when I said, what are you going to do about the heat? All this heat coming in now so much sooner for grapes. He says, well, we'll work around it. We harvest earlier. So there's always a pivot around, right? Always. Are you using AI in your restaurants?
Not a lot yet. I think there will be a role for AI. But as I mentioned, things like voice recognition and demand analysis is probably the sort of best use cases. But so far, we're still relatively low tech on that front.
Do you use it? Do your kids use it?
Like having ChatGPT write their papers? I hope not.
Oh. Why not? Why not? Yeah. But do you use it?
I just play around with it.
Yeah, I've just started to play around with it too. Yeah. Let's see. So, what is the next chapter for Flynn Group? What's the plan?
So I think we will keep growing, as I said, in our core business, but also more international and more adjacencies. I'm very excited about that. And then on the hotel front, I expect that we will grow aggressively there as well.
Do you think you'll try other countries for your restaurants?
Yeah.
You will?
Yeah, for sure.
What countries do you have in mind, maybe?
Well, it's a big world. And, Europe has its challenges, but it also might be a good market for us. The Middle East is a surprisingly good market for American brands.
Really?
Central and South America, can be very good markets.
Wow, you have big plans. Good for you.
Awesome.
So you have owned a home in Napa Valley for many years. How are you feeling about the real estate market, given the wildfires of 2017 and 2020, devastating on both occasions, and the lack of ability to get insurance? How are you feeling about the real estate market?
Well, luckily I don't have any plans to sell my house anytime soon. If I did, I might worry a lot about it because we were carried by Chubb, and then Chubb dropped us, but miraculously State Farm picked us up, but they've informed us they're going to drop us.
I was going to say, that is miraculous.
For our audience, we have a house like on top of a hill in Oakville, and it's fire central, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what we'll do. We'll lose coverage in May of next year, and I'll look at options, but I may just go naked there as well.
California Fair plan.
Yeah, but my understanding is that there's a pretty low limit to what that insures. Yeah, so.
But it's better than nothing. It's 3 just for the building, but you get to keep the land.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of any clients I have, winery owners or homeowners that have insurance. They don't.
Yeah.
They're self-insured, or they have California Fair housing is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah. The biggest effect I felt from it is in our hotels up here, especially Solage, where the 20 fire came pretty close to Solage.
It did.
But even before that, when we bought the resort, insurance cost us like $250,000, and the next year it went to $400,000, and then the 20 fire hit, and it went to $1.9 million.
1.9.
Yeah, and I wouldn't carry it, but our loan requires it.
So you've got it.
So we've got it. Yeah.
You're paying 1.9. Isn't that outrageous?
Yeah, and it's just a collection of little cottages. The odds of there being a total loss are pretty low.
Yeah, I was talking to a client of mine this morning, and he said to me, he's got a huge home here, and he said, it's really annoying because they won't even let the state will not allow the insurance companies to even say, okay, we'll insure you for fire, but for nothing else. You have to take the whole package. So the regulations are really causing a lot of problems. So many people have tens of millions of dollars, whether it be in wineries or homes or whatever, uncovered, unsecured, and the fires are coming faster and earlier every year.
So I think one thing we're doing and everyone is doing is a lot of fire protection around their homes and, making it as fire safe as possible.
Yeah.
But the other is like, in our little community on Oakville Grade, we're working on standing up sort of private fire protection.
Yeah.
And having equipment on site and having like a service. We haven't done it yet. But
keeping the equipment there on site?
We're trying to figure out what the right solution is, but I think you need some on site so that when you need it, you need it. Like it can happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, I remember somebody coming to look at a house that I had for sale, a big house, and he said, "Yeah, we lost our home. It was a big property in Sonoma that they'd actually lost, but they were looking in St. Helena at this beautiful home." And I said, "Oh yeah, well this property has 3 fire hydrants." He goes, "You know what? I had 7." He said, "Unless somebody's out there by the fire hydrant, and nothing's going to happen." Let's see. Oh, I do want to ask you about working in Australia and New Zealand. I'm not familiar with New Zealand, but the labour laws. So what has it been like for you? Any challenges in working in a new country now with the labour laws? I know they have a minimum wage down there, and they have healthcare, and they have vacation pay. So how are you navigating that? Because you're not used to that here.
No, but we bought a business that was already complying with law down there, so we have a team that knows how to do that. It's interesting because Australia is like Europe in that they have sector councils, so for different business sectors, and so there are separate work rules for restaurants. And the wages are set by this sector council and the other work rules about meal and rest breaks and paid time off and family leave and things like that. When the FAST Act passed in California, AB 257, people were so outraged that it set up a sector council and how unprecedented that was and how communistic it was. And it's maybe because they don't know, but that's actually common around the world. So, I was opposed to it in California. I still am. Yeah. But it wasn't unprecedented.
Right,
and so you learn to live with it, and it's baked into the economics of the model. It causes prices to be higher. And you know how high prices are in Australia. That's partly because the wages are much higher and the rents are much higher and everything is much higher.
Oh my God, the cost of living down there is unbelievable. And the real estate, I think part of the reason the real estate, there's several reasons. Number one, everything goes to auction. So things can sell for millions over what the reserve is, but you don't know what the reserve is. Yeah. Nobody knows until the hammer comes down, But the other reason I think is that a lot of people from Europe with the euro, Britain with the British pound, and Americans with the American dollar are getting citizenship down there, and it's petty cash to them, with the exchange rate because it's so low at the moment. I wanted to also ask you about the tipping culture. So we have a tipping culture here in the States where, well, you can speak to it better than I can. Who relies on tips in the hospitality industry? Is it across the board with fast food, or is it mostly in sit-down restaurants?
No, it's primarily sit-down restaurants. It's people in the chain of service in full-service restaurants.
Right.
And so that's your host, your server, your bartender. Rules vary between states, but increasingly now tips are pooled and they're shared with back of house as well. Yeah. But it's absolutely baked into the economic model. Yeah. As a guest, I find the experience worse when I have to tip in the States versus in Europe or anywhere else in the world where you don't. Pretty much. I like seeing the price, and the price is the price you pay, and I don't find that the service is worse anywhere else. I mean, there's this idea that, I don't like tipping, but at least I get better service. I don't really think so. However, servers love tipping because they make much, much more, good ones in decent restaurants than they would with a minimum wage without a tipping convention. And so I'll give you an example. Our average Applebee's servers, and we're not a fancy restaurant, makes something like, I forget what the average, we just did it recently, it was like $36 an hour when you include the wage we pay them and tips, right? And that's high. Yeah. Right? I mean, California just adopted a $20 minimum wage for fast food workers, and full service workers are horrified that, what if they extend that to full service restaurants and people are now well, now you have a living wage and so I don't have to tip anymore, and tipping goes away. they're much better off with
Please
tipping.
God, they would go. Tipping when you're traveling is so awful. But we all say it too when we travel now, and the Americans have taken that culture all around the world, and they tip anyway. And so now when you go to Australia where things are so expensive and they don't rely on tips at all, they're well paid, they expect it, and these machines that they bring out now to put your card in,
Well, I think where tipping is probably the most under siege right now is in counter service. So we've all experienced it. You're getting, anything, a sandwich in the middle of the day at lunch downtown. And all the guy does is like take it from here and put it here and puts this in front of you and asks for an extra 20%.
I know.
And I always tip because that's just the way I am. But like my kids are outraged by this.
And the young people.
And especially when they do it in a way that shames you if you don't tip.
Oh, yeah.
And, there's kind of a growing revolt against tipping.
It's like that at the table in Sydney, I have to tell you, and all over Australia, when they bring you that machine and you go to, you put your card in and you go to process it, they go, but there's just one more step, would you know? I think the young people are the ones that are really going to eventually get rid of tipping. I think it would be so much nicer if everybody just paid their people, tell us what the price is, and get rid of tipping. It is very stressful.
As a guest, I might prefer that, but I don't advocate for the elimination of tipping because these hardworking servers all over the country would probably see their compensation cut in half. Yeah, and I wouldn't want that.
Oh, no, not at all. But what I'm saying is if that goes away, then they should be. I don't know, why does America not pay their people?
They won't. I mean, being a server in a full-service restaurant is a well-paying job, right?
Yeah.
And if you're never going to regulate the amount of money they're currently making.
Yeah.
Like if you get rid of tipping, it's certain that server wages will go down. You'll probably see an increase in back-of-house wages. Like you'll just have more money to pay the back-of-house, but it's very bad for servers.
Yeah.
And ask any server.
Yeah, and it's complicated because...
It's funny because, sorry to interrupt, but there are movements around the country right now by a group called One Fair Wage, and they're trying to eliminate the tip credit. So this is a credit employers get that allow them to pay a lower wage to their servers, provided the combination of that wage plus tips clears the minimum wage, and it always does, it has to, but they always make much more than that. One Fair Wage is facing fierce opposition from servers all over the country. Like the people who come out to city hearings, like planning commission or whatever, board of supervisors hearings, and protest are servers who would be getting the increased wage because they know they're going to make less money under that sort of thing.
Interesting. I think I've asked you everything. Is there anything else you want to share with us about any of your businesses? Next chapters? Have we covered everything?
We've covered everything.
Well, you know what?
I look forward to welcoming you all to the Huntington for a martini and a chicken pot pie in the fall of 2025.
And I look forward to interviewing you in Sydney when we're both down there sometime.
That'd be great.
And you can give me an update on all your restaurants down there.
Right.
And
the pizza's on me.
Yeah, well, so that's fantastic. Congratulations on your success and your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you next week.